All right, when we last left off, we were talking about the Stamp Act, passed in 1765. Grenville gets Parliament to pass legislation that will impose a minor tax on printed goods and paper goods. Everything from legal documents, for example, to that cover things like wills or land transfers. So anytime anyone had to file paperwork at a local office, the colonies, they'd have to pay a small fee. There were other things, though, other papers that had to get this stamp as well, such as newspapers. And even things like playing cards had to have stamps to show that you had paid a tax as part of this transaction. This was a tax that, as I think I mentioned on Tuesday, had a history. They were already doing this in England. They just hadn't done it in the colonies. And so when it passed, it was not something that aroused a whole lot of debate in Parliament. However, as a tax for the colonies, it was something that was perhaps uniquely suited to antagonize different constituencies that would come together in protest against the Stamp Act. The first of these, and arguably the most important, were lawyers who would now have to face the burden of basically paying taxes every time they filed any kind of legal document. The second was that newspaper editors would now have a tax. And then finally, the people playing cards, this may have been less important, but many of the people who were most likely to be gambling or playing cards were people who were somewhat rough around the edges in the seaport cities, sailors, gangs of laborers, people like that. All of these groups would come together in protest of the Stamp Act. But it was not in the port cities that this began. It was rather in Virginia that the spark turns into the flame. In the House of Burgesses in Virginia, one of the representative bodies, they debate the Stamp Act, the news that the Stamp Act has been passed. And in Virginia, there's a lawyer named Patrick Henry, who has already distinguished himself as one of the newest members of the House of Burgesses as being a bit of a firebrand and a bomb thrower, at least rhetorically. And he makes a speech about the Stamp Act that is stunning in its uncompromising tone. He says that the ambition to tax the colonists outside of their own elected assemblies has, quote, a manifest tendency to destroy British as well as American freedom, unquote. This speech, which continues in this vein for some time, is entertaining, but it doesn't seem to really have necessarily led to any action concretely. Most of the representatives in the House of Burgesses go home. Henry, though, and a handful of others stay behind and pass something that doesn't actually have any binding implications because they don't really have a quorum, which proclaims that the Stamp Act is illegal and should not be implemented. The fact that this is not something that has actually been passed by the House of Burgesses, though, gets left out when the news of Henry's actions reach other major population centers who report that the Virginians have effectively taken this strong principled stand against this tax. In Boston, the reaction is especially swift and especially dramatic. By August of 1765, you have a group of people who are printers affected by the tax, distillers also affected by the tax, and artisans gather together and form a group that is going to be the embryonic beginnings of formalized resistance. They're called the Loyal Nine. And the Loyal Nine is aiming to weld together very different constituencies in the port town of Boston in unison to fight the Stamp Act. These include leaders of the city's working class or laboring class, And it includes as well a man that today you probably best know him as adorning a beer, a brand of beer, Sam Adams. But Sam Adams' real contribution here was as an organizer. He was actually something of a failure in most vocations in his life, but he was a superb rabble rouser, someone who was able to organize the local community in a way that few others could. He was charismatic, resourceful, and utterly determined of his own righteousness. He signed a lot of his correspondence and notes, a religious politician, and he was something of a Puritan in his temperament and disposition and view of life. Thanks to him and the other organizers of the Loyal Nine, by mid-August, there is a public demonstration. And forgive me as I go into detail about this, but it's very important to understand this first explosion of protest, because all of the elements that you're going to see going forward first show up here and kind of spring into being at this moment. The protest they form is meant to threaten. They create an effigy, a human figure, like a dummy, of the local royal appointee named Andrew Oliver, who was supposed to distribute the stamps and collect the fees. He had gotten this plum position. And so they create an effigy. They tear down a small building that was supposed to be the place where these stamps would be sold. They built a bonfire near Andrew Oliver's house, light it on fire, chop the head off the effigy, and throw the dummy into the fire. And then they go throw stones at Andrew Oliver's house, just for good measure. This is something where, a lot of these guys, kind of local hooligans, basically, have gotten impressed into service and are happy to fight as part of this group or community effort. And very quickly, Andrew Oliver gets the message that his life might be at risk if he decides to go forward with his job, and he resigns. And you can see here, this is Andrew Oliver on the left, and on the right, this very public resignation that is advertised by local agitators. The True-Born Sons of Liberty are desired to meet under Liberty Tree at noon this day to hear the public resignation under oath. In other words, they want him to publicly declare under oath that he is stepping down, which he does. And this is a momentous shift, because what they have done is they cannot fight the law that is passed in Parliament through a parliamentary procedure, but they can prevent the law from being implemented. And that's what they do. Eventually, by the end of the year, you can see the date on this, and late in mid-December, Oliver steps down. The mobs who have intimidated Oliver into resigning reunite shortly thereafter, and they begin to attack homes of other British officials, including Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson. This is not a minor figure. This is someone of immense importance for the Massachusetts colony. He is effectively the colony's governor. The way that the governorships worked, he was the one who was on the ground. And strikingly, he is none other than Andrew Oliver's brother-in-law. So these are two high-level appointees who have kind of used nepotism to advance their careers. They're moving forward, and they're doing pretty well until they collide with this movement. And this mob goes to Hutchinson's house, and Hutchinson flees because he can see that they're out for blood. And they're about to sit down for tea. They flee out the back door, he, his wife, his children, and the mob comes in and basically destroys the house from top to bottom. they do not wait for any kind of attempt to compromise. That they destroy the thing top to bottom. And by this point, violence toward these sorts of officials has begun to spread to other places in the colonies. You can see here, I just wanted to show you, like, this is what the stamp would have looked like here on the left. And this is the kind of repulse that the printers who are opposing the Stamp Act come up with, that this is the place to affix the stamp, the death's head, that violence here is being threatened, not very subtly, toward anyone who would try to implement the Stamp Act. Now, if you recall on that slide that you saw of Oliver's resignation, you saw the phrase, the Sons of Liberty. This becomes the name of the formal organization throughout not only Massachusetts, but all of the colonies that will lead the resistance to the Stamp Act. It is going to connect merchants, lawyers, well-off artisans, other elites, and all of the coastal cities, which is where this is primarily taking place. And it's taking place there because these are the primary conduits for implementing this tax.